Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me down there in Tequila, Georgia, my good friend from the University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green. Matt, good evening, sir. Or good morning, excuse me. I'm still getting used to these Sunday morning shows here on our college football week 3 recap. Matt Green, how are you doing, sir?
Yes, sir. It is good to be back. We're nice and fresh. Got everything fresh in our mind here in the morning. Then we can dive into the NFL action on Sunday. But yeah, man, it was another action-packed Sunday. Me and my buddy went up to the casino and did a little gambling while watching a bunch of football on TV. So it was good stuff.
Like the North Carolina Cherokees or Cherokee Casino?
Yeah, drove to Cherokee. Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
How is that? Is it overwhelming?
I've gone up there for March Madness. Never actually gone up there for a college football Saturday. And let's just say I'm way better at gambling college football than college basketball. That was a lot more fun for me.
Well, you're also back. So how did that, do you just drive back same night? Is it you left early this morning?
Yeah, my buddy drove back same night. So shout out to the other Chase. For sure. I was like, I'm not really trying to drive. So if you're trying to drive, we can do it. But I'm not trying to do that. Same guy who drove to the cocktail party same day. So,
he's built different.
Exactly. He's built different for sure.
Yeah, it's not me. I'm not doing
Also got a firsthand view, not to put Chase on blast, but got a firsthand view of the meltdown that is happening in the Gator fan base.
It's not good. And we'll get into the Gators and where that is following demoralizing home loss to A&M on Saturday in the monsoon at the Swamp. But that's a little bit down the line. Our teams had very different weekends. Matt Green, as Tennessee moves to 3-0, Georgia also moves to 3-0. Do you know one thing that the two schools have in common right now, Matt Green?
A lot of things, right? 3-0, Southeastern Conference football.
What's the biggest one?
What Georgia and Tennessee have in common?
Right now, through 3 games.
Oh, I bet it's that they have not allowed a touchdown?
Yes. Neither school has allowed a defensive touchdown through 3 weeks.
Big time. Tennessee, maybe getting on that floor, on that Georgia level defensively. Who knows? We'll see.
Well, your team here, Matt Green, as Tennessee was up 71-0 on Kent State, and we'll get into that. I have on my other screen and giving more attention in that second half to Georgia, Kentucky, and I just have some thoughts on your team, Matt Green, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on your Georgia Bulldogs escaping Lexington with a victory thanks to a ill-timed punt decision by Mark Stoops late in the contest.
I'm not sure what you're referencing, sir. My team last night 10-1 win over the best team in baseball. 10 different guys scored a run. Chris Sale went 6 strong, 6 innings. It's Braves' big win over the Dodgers. So I'm not what I thought it was a great Saturday night, right?
Okay. It was a good night for the Braves, but we're not going to do this, Matt Green. You're going to have to face this because I have been saying all offseason, I have been saying through the first 3 weeks now that this Georgia offense is different and not in a good way. The defense, still elite. The defense was flying all over the place last night. It was another strong defensive performance from the Dogs. However, that is what we come to know. Like, Georgia's defense under Kirby Smart is going to be elite every single year. That is part of the deal here and what he has built on the defensive side of the ball, the juggernaut that is Georgia's defense. However, they have become a top 10 offense over the last couple of years, and a lot of that was Todd Monken, and there was a flip post James Coley at Georgia. This year...
Still an elite offense with Bobo last year, but go on.
Still an elite, but it was still... They had Brock Bowers. They had other dudes who were still game wreckers. They had Ladd McConkey. It was still kind of some leftovers of guys who were NFL-type guys. Ladd McConkey, really good out of the gate for the Chargers. They've had a lot of drain of some high-quality difference makers, at the skill position spot. Rod Thomas dismissed before the year. We don't really know how much that really would have affected things going into this year. Dylan Bell, solid player. You look at Lennon Humphrey, solid player. Arian Smith, solid player. Oscar Delt, solid player. Trevor Etienne, solid player. That's something
That's the one I'll disagree with you on, but
well,
go on.
And David Pollock, Georgia alum. I sent you this tweet, and it's something that I have been saying all offseason and going into this year was, it's not that Georgia has a dearth of offensive talent. They just don't have anyone great anymore. They don't have, this particular year, they don't have any game wreckers. They don't have anybody that puts a lot of fear in opposing, like, elite defensive minds in the sport. And this is a direct tweet from David Pollock last night. Quote, "This will be very unpopular amongst Georgia fans. I see a lot of really good players on offense, but I don't see a lot of great." And that even includes Carson Beck, who did not have a great game last night in Lexington. I just look at this Tate Rutledge. I don't know if you know the current update there, but he gets hurt last night. That could be a situation to monitor for Georgia down the line if that's something that lingers. I don't know what's going on there, but ultimately Georgia survives. But I think Georgia fans have just kind of like, we're going to get into gear, we're going to get through, and it's going to be fine. The problem is, and the difference between 2 years ago and Kirby is citing like the Mizzou comeback for win and like when Georgia has struggled in Lexington before, from my vantage point, the difference is the schedule is still really nice. The difference this year, as opposed to those last couple years and the years that they obviously struggled to win at Lexington 2 years ago and then in their first national title year, which is what Georgia fans are looking at. I would push back and say, the second one, excuse me.
Yeah.
I would push back though and say, okay, but you didn't go to Ole Miss. You didn't have a top 5 Tennessee team coming to town. You didn't go to Alabama. You didn't have
You had a top 5 Tennessee team. You had the number 1
very
Tennessee
different,
team.
very different Tennessee team.
I mean, they were the number 1 ranked team in the country.
But Nico Iamaleava is a different kind of quarterback. Like, it's just a different type of player.
Yeah.
Tennessee is playing with a different kind of dominance than that 2022 team was. It's just different. As someone who's watched every snap of the Josh Heupel era, it's different, especially on defense, which is the biggest change. It's just different. So you're going to have 4 top 5 matchups still on this schedule in the regular season. That's the difference, is the margins for error for Georgia is very thin because of their schedule and because of how crowded the tier 1 is in the SEC. Ole Miss, Mizzou, Tennessee, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia are all not getting in the college football playoff. And I think what we're seeing early on is
playing all of them except for Mizzou.
Exactly. And you see Texas's offense, they're rolling. You see Bama's offense when they're really firing in Madison, they're rolling. Tennessee's offense, obviously rolling. Ole Miss is the number 1 scoring offense in the sport. And then you look at Georgia's offense, you were able to get away with that early. Like, you were able to get away with that in the regular season years ago when your schedule was what it was. And I'm not criticizing Georgia for having the schedule that they did. I am saying it is a different kind of beast now with the schedule that they have in front of them, that if you're a Georgia fan and you don't think that you have real problems and there should be real concerns, Ole Miss is now favored in the ESPN projections of that game. And I understand this will change a little bit, but Alabama, Georgia will tell us a lot in 2 weeks. I'm glad both have a bye, and I'm unbelievably excited for that game. But I think it's fair to just say, Georgia, I understand they haven't lost a regular season game in years. I understand that. You have to look at every year as its own type of deal. And this year in particular, I think it's fair to be objective and say, this Georgia offense does not scare people the way that the offenses have scared them over the last couple of years in this Georgia dominant run. And if they're the 27th or 22nd best offense and the number 1 defense or number 2 defense, is that enough to get through this schedule and make the college football playoff? Because the margin for error is so thin at the top of this conference this year. That is my broader point. Is that fair?
So that's a lot to unpack there, for sure. But so to start with, I think this is what we talked about with losing guys like Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. I mean, a case could be made that, those are Georgia's 2 best pass catchers in the last decade, So, you lost 2 explosive playmakers, and especially guys that made a lot of catches, a lot of plays after the catch as well. So I think obviously those guys are going to be tough to replace. The one part I disagree with you is Trevor Etienne is elite. Like, that dude is a baller. Like, he had
Elite?
no room to run. Absolutely, dude. If you were watching, he made 2 or 3 guys miss every single time he touched the ball. The problem was half of that was in the backfield, and it would be a 1-yard gain because Georgia was creating no room to run offensively. You saw in the second half, at least Etienne, he still ended up with what, like 80-something yards, 79 yards on 19 carries.
4.2 yards per attempt. His longest run was 17 yards, 19 carries, 79 yards. Georgia ran the ball 3.4 yards per attempt in this game. 30 carries, 102 yards. That's just different.
Yeah, like that's what I would be the most worried about because, like, obviously the silver lining, you can talk about it if you want, like, oh, this is what Georgia does every time they go to Lexington, Kentucky. So obviously you've seen Georgia have bad performances in Lexington and still, win the national championship. But just judging in the 2024, scope, like, yeah, this was a terrible performance offensively. And not only that, like, the fumbles too, like they fumbled it twice and were able to get on it. Like they just couldn't sustain any sort of drive. Like this game just went like to the exact playbook of what Kentucky wanted to do. Like, because I mean, that's the thing. Like Georgia still hasn't allowed a team in the red zone through the first 3 games of the season. So like Kentucky they didn't get in the red zone. Obviously, so that's not a good thing, but they moved the ball and they kept the ball. Like they had the ball for 35 minutes in this game. Like I think Georgia only got the ball 4 times in the second half. It felt kind of like that South Carolina game from last year where Georgia just did nothing in the first half, but then you saw they were almost perfect in the second half and put together like 4 straight scoring drives and won the game. It's like you were just assuming at some point Georgia's going to put together some scoring drives and they just, I mean, they have 1 touchdown in this whole game. So yeah, I mean, I think you should definitely worry about Georgia's offense. The play, I think there are good enough playmakers on this team because I think Carson Beck is elite. I think this was just one of the worst performances I've seen from Carson Beck. Like he was off, like the run game was off, and Carson Beck, when he did have guys open downfield, he missed a couple. So like he had Dylan Bell on that one that, that could have been like a 60-yard touchdown. I know there was one in like the second quarter too. It's like those change the games if he hits those. And I think that's been Carson Beck's one weakness, really. I mean, and you saw Carson Beck, how many plays he kind of kept alive with his legs too. Like he was under some pressure. So I think Carson Beck still is that guy. It's hard to explain how poor this offense looked on Saturday, but I think the one weakness of Carson Beck's game has been that deep ball and his deep ball accuracy, because that 15 to 25 yard window, he seems to hit dudes in stride perfectly, like those mid-tier throws. But for whatever reason, he doesn't seem to connect on the deep ball at like the same rate that like a Stetson Bennett did, even though he's clearly got more arm talent.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Because there was some wondering aloud I saw on Twitter and Dog's Twitter about like if Carson's banged up and if he's not at 100% right now, maybe that would explain some of it. But you look at, I mean, Dominic Lovett, that 30-yard catch to really seal the game for Georgia was huge. He had a good game, but he's the one where I would say he still scares you, and I think he should scare opposing defensive coordinators here in the next couple weeks. He is a dude. Like Dominic Lovett is a NFL receiver. But you look at the rest of how Georgia's receiving room did in this game. Dylan Bell, 1 reception, 20 yards. Colby Young, 2 for 20. Arian Smith, 2 for 13. Oscar Delp, 2 for 12. You just look at it. I mean, Etienne, 1 for 11. Like part of what Etienne, the difference is like Dylan Sampson has been really active, obviously, in the receiving game for Tennessee, and he's a really versatile back. And I think that was something that I think we thought we would see more of with Georgia, and especially in a game like this, where you would assume you would get the ball in space to your backs and let them work on the perimeter, especially with a player like Etienne. But that didn't really happen. But it just goes to show, like, Delp's solid. Urasek is solid. Arian Smith, probably a boom or bust kind of guy in every game where he might have a big game or you might not hear from. London Humphreys, nothing in this game. But a lot of transfers.
Nate Frazier hardly played in this game.
That was a weird one too. I don't know why Nate Frazier wasn't a big factor in this game. That was strange. But I just look at it. I mean, Georgia, it's not like Georgia's going 8-4 and 9-3. But I do think with this schedule and with the guys that they have out wide this year, they still have dudes I like coming up. They have a true freshman. I think Lawson Lucky. You look at Nate Frazier, we've talked about and hyped up on this podcast. They have guys coming through who I think next year, I think there's going to be a lot more great offensive skill players on this Georgia team next year. I just think this year they don't have the in-house, older, ready-to-go options to be as dynamic as they might need to be to win a national championship. They're number one right now, but I think everyone looking around, and I think even if you gave Kirby some truth serum, would be like, I don't think we're the number one team in the country right now. I don't know if it's Ohio State. I don't know if it's Texas. I don't know. I mean, Tennessee, ESPN's Football Power Index moved Tennessee ahead of Georgia to number 4. Georgia's number 5 now nationally. So I think the numbers are starting to shift a little bit with Georgia, and I think a lot of it has nothing to do with the defense. This defense is still, you can make the case, the best in college football. It's a defense that I would want to play less than any other defense in the sport. However, this offense does not scare me. There are guys where Tennessee can play press coverage against this group in November, and it doesn't scare you. They're starting to do a lot more press man than they've ever done with Dramad and Ricky Gibson and company. I don't think they have those guys. I mean, the tight end position, where we've just comes to really expect dominance from Tennessee. Oscar Delp is a solid player. He's not a game wrecker. He's not Darnell Washington. He's not Brock Bowers. Those guys don't come along very often. Maybe it's Jaden Riddell. Maybe it's Lawson Lucky.
Isn't Brock Bowers.
No, but I'm just saying those kind of guys that really scare you. We're like, I don't know who's supposed to guard Darnell Washington. Like, I don't know who's supposed to get matched up with and bring Darnell Washington down. Remember the leap he made a couple of years ago, where it's like, I don't even know what to do with it. Like, it's just it's just different when you have him and Brock Bowers on the field together. I just don't know that Georgia can solve this season, and I think people are Georgia fans, the most optimistic viewpoint is like, we've been here before. Winning on the road in the SEC is hard. We gotta, like, the most important thing is just getting a win. But I just continue to drive home the point. The difference is this year, this schedule, you can't play like that. The offense can't work like this. You have to have somebody pop.
I think if Beck is the best quarterback in the country, these playmakers are good enough. But if Beck's not the best quarterback in the country, then you need some playmakers to make him look good at times. So I still think there's a potential that Beck is that guy, but
I mean, are you worried about Beck?
I mean, there's reason to be a little worried. I mean, that Clemson game, that 34-3, like, I mean, let's not forget, like, that was 6-0 at the half. Like, and that game kind of changed in like a 4-play swing, like early in the fourth quarter, like from that London Humphrey, it was like a 3rd and 8 or something that they threw a 40-yard touchdown. I think that like 2 plays later is that Malachi Starks interception. Then the next play is Nate Frazier's like 50-yard run. And all of a sudden it looks like Georgia's blowing Clemson out. Whereas they didn't really necessarily make that many plays in that game either, even though the defensive performance. See, that's the thing. So the defense is obviously hasn't led the opponent in the red zone and hasn't given up a touchdown, but giving up 170 yards on the ground like this to Kentucky, like, this is what I thought Brock Vandegrift was going to be, like a limited kind of passer, but solid and just athletic enough to keep defenses honest. And like, if you have a good run game, like you could have some sort of pulse offensively with a guy that can do that in the college game. We did, but how do we see 1 total yard against South Carolina and he gets benched? And then you see, 24 first downs for Kentucky in this game versus 12 for Georgia. Like, they were just on the field. I mean, I can't say you have no concern. I still think Carson Beck, is, like I've said, is a really good college quarterback. But I mean, I think you can be a little worried about this offense because Kentucky hasn't looked like a great team so far. Obviously, when you get embarrassed, you throw everything out, and start from scratch. And I'm sure Kentucky made a lot of adjustments from what they did a week ago versus South Carolina. And, if you're a blindly optimistic Georgia fan, you can just, credit this to, Georgia's got this crazy stretch and of schedules and Bama's coming up. They were looking ahead, whatever. I don't think that's true. I think Kirby Smart is just, I think he's got this team, that's so subconsciously, maybe you just don't get up for Kentucky the same way you get up for another game, but that's not on Kirby Smart, or it could be on Kirby Smart. You can blame Kirby Smart if you want, but I'm saying, Kirby has this team ready to play every week, like 42 regular season wins in a row. It's just, these things happen. Hopefully it's just a one-off for Georgia, but I mean, you got to be a little concerned about what you're seeing from the offense.
Absolutely.
The green line stat of the week, I don't know if you saw this. It was probably on the broadcast. Last 5 years, fewest points scored by Georgia football. 16 in 22 at Kentucky, 14 in 2020 at Kentucky, and now 13 in 2024 at Kentucky. So maybe this is just something weird and Georgia will figure out to right the ship. But no, I fully expect, only because of who teams played this week, I don't expect anyone to jump Georgia at number 1. But last week, what did they get? They got 54 of the 63 first place votes. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they're at like 30 first place votes or something. I think Ohio State, were they off? I didn't even watch Ohio State play.
I think they were off this week.
They have a bye week yesterday. So I don't know if Ohio State can really jump in a bye week, but Texas, now having 2 quarterbacks that are studs, yeah, maybe they might take some of those first place votes.
I was going to say, I feel like it probably should be Texas at this point, but the Quinn Ewers injury, I don't know how much that clouds it in terms of what happens there.
But Arch Manning looked damn good, and I guarantee Tennessee gets 1 first place vote. I guarantee it.
America's team. Final thing here, though, before we get out of Kentucky, Georgia, I can't emphasize enough how I would have needed a new TV if my coach had called that punt at midfield with the game on the line. You're driving down the field, 4th and short, and you just give the ball back to Georgia and expecting your defense to get 1 stop. Instead of just going for it at midfield. It's like the game's over anyway. It makes no sense. Like, mathematically, it makes no sense. Coaching wise, like in 2024, you cannot punt that football. Even if you don't get it, Georgia's not in immediate field goal range. If they get a first down, the game is still over. There is no reason for you not to put the ball in Brock Vandegrift's hands and see if you get it. I'm not saying you're going to get it, but to not give your team a chance in that spot was insane. You're 1-1. You're not ranked. You're not playing for a national title. What are you worried about? Like, you're going to lose this. It's
devil's
ridiculous.
Advocate is that you held this team to 13 points. Like, Georgia had 10 first downs in the whole game prior to that. So, I mean, you'd been.
Did they just go down and score in that previous drive?
Maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I mean, but still, like, as Kentucky, like, you were 4th and 8 isn't a super high, percentage, but I don't know. I can understand it when you had all 3 timeouts and the 2-minute warning. Like,
you're on Georgia's side of the field.
Of course, but but you could pin them deep, and then Georgia's been conservative the whole game, shutting them down, and
don't do this.
Elite.
It was ridiculous.
There's a strategy to be had there. I was definitely thinking they were going to go for it there, but yeah. Last thing I'll say, there was 2 elite players in this game for Georgia. Like I said, Trevor Etienne is the only reason Georgia scored any points offensively, as far as I'm concerned in this game. And then Jalen Walker defensively. That dude is just a one-man wrecking crew. Like I said all last year, especially in that Alabama game, I think he had like 12 snaps or something in the Alabama game. The dude just creates havoc when he's in the game. He's in the backfield all the time. Oh, that was another one. On one of Kentucky's touchdown drive or field goal drives, did the worst roughing the passer call I've ever seen in my entire life on Jalen Walker. Did you see that one? Georgia gets
that was a really bad one, yes.
Georgia gets a 3rd down stop, like deep in Kentucky territory on a perfect spear, like not leading with the helmet, right to the quarterback's midsection. Like, what are we doing here?
I agree. That was pretty bad. Switching gears here, Tennessee, they blow out. The numbers are just unbelievable for Tennessee against Kent State. They try, like, if Tennessee, I mean, Nico couldn't even make it through the second quarter before the dogs are called off here for Tennessee. They could have scored 140, I think, if they wanted to. It could have been those old Cumberland versus School X scores from in the 1920s. It was wild. Matt Green.
Let me jump in here. I'm glad you brought that up because after watching this game, I'm convinced that Georgia Tech Cumberland never happened. That's completely false, made up folklore. This team was up. If this team would have scored 37 points every quarter, it would have been 148 points.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, no one can score points faster than Tennessee was scoring points in this first quarter. It's not possible. They didn't even throw in the onside kick. I don't know what kind of sportsmanship that is. No, but like,
well,
so
it was actually a look. It was an audible. The kicker had an audible. Like, so if Kent State gave a look like that, where they opened up, if you watch the alignment of Kent State on that return, it was just right there. So it's just to get reps in. And they were like, all right, we're going to try it. And then you just do it.
I'm here for it. But yeah, so if that pace would not have added up to 222 points, as far as I'm concerned, that's impossible.
Yeah.
But I'll let you, that was my first takeaway, but go ahead.
No, I mean, it was wild because no SEC team has scored 70 since Ole Miss in 2015. The Daily Beacon had some really good stuff on here, the student newspaper at Tennessee. It was the most in the quarter, most in this era.
It scored 70.
Yeah.
Multiple teams scored 70 this year.
No. No SEC team has scored above 70 since Ole Miss in 2015.
Are you sure about that?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. Didn't Auburn score 70 like week 1 versus?
No, I don't think so.
Ole Miss scored 70. Like I thought earlier this.
I don't think so.
Earlier this year. No,
I don't think they hit 70.
Am I off?
I don't think they hit 70. Let's see here.
There has to be some sort of first half record. They said.
Oh, they did get 76. Okay, they did.
There you go.
Maybe it's just Tennessee. Maybe that one's just Tennessee.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out like that.
No, sorry, that's not even like it was from. I don't know. But Tennessee, according to the SEC Network, this also from the Beacon, Tennessee 65 first half points were the most in a half by any team in the last 20 seasons. That was like while they were doing it. I don't know if it's even further because they were like that's just where the ESPN stats and info was.
Where the stats. I would like to see a first half. Someone do that.
I mean, 65 first half points. And it could have been worse. Matt Green. Kent State went 3 and out over and over again. They kept fumbling over the head of the quarterback on the first 3 possessions for Kent State. One of them resulted in a safety. This was brutal all across the board. On threes, Jesse Simonton said, quote, "This was domination rarely seen in D1 football. The Vols had close to 300 yards in the first quarter and finished with a 740 to 112 yardage advantage with a whopping 9 touchdowns." Nico didn't, again, one of the things that should scare a lot of teams here when talking about, and I understand people just keep making it's Chattanooga, it's Kent State. Look across FBS. There are so many schools that play with their food. Alabama struggling against South Florida. There are teams that do not do what Tennessee did to 2 schools. No schools are doing what Tennessee did to a top 25 team in a neutral site game the previous week to NC State. That was a 51-10 game, and that could have been worse if Tennessee wanted to make it worse. One of the things that should be very, very scary for opposing defenses or opposing coaches down the stretch here for Tennessee. Nico has, the last 2 weeks, it hasn't been the cleanest, and he still makes these throws. He had that Chris Brazzell 50-yard bomb down the right side, perfectly thrown in stride. It was a dart. And Tennessee obviously goes heavy 12 personnel last week against NC State, and then they open it back up this week. Dylan Sampson had like 4 touchdowns in the first quarter this one, because you wondered if there was going to be a drop-off from Jalen to Dylan this season. There's no drop-off. Dylan's actually better. He's more versatile than what you had with Wright, and Wright's an NFL back, and Wright was awesome. Nico's going to continue to get it better. He's just, the poise is there. The pass pro wasn't great in this game, and it didn't really matter. Nico was taking some hits that I don't love that he's still taking in this game, but the defense is just overwhelming. The front 7, Keenan Peely is playing his tail off, though. They're rotating so much in the front 7 that these guys are all fresh. Like, they're playing 20 snaps last night. Like, they're not having to burn a lot of guys through these first 3 weeks going to Oklahoma. The line for Oklahoma, Matt Green, has already moved up to 7.5, I think, on FanDuel. Oklahoma's favored not long ago. And the line just keeps growing for Tennessee. And I think one of the things you're seeing, ESPN, the numbers are starting to really like what Tennessee is doing. They move up to number 4 in Football Power Index. I'm curious where they are in S&P Plus. Bill Connolly sat on ESPN this week. But Tennessee is obliterating people while playing B+ offense and A+ defense. There's going to be a point where Tennessee is playing A+ offense, and with this defense having the kind of ceiling that it has, and the kind of, just depth in that front 7, is got to be terrifying, because this is the most complete group in the country right now. Like, there's just not a better overall team in the country through 3 weeks than what we're seeing from Tennessee, because Tennessee is just dominating. There's nothing else they can do through 3 weeks. Like, it's just, they are passing every test, and we'll see what it looks like in Norman next Saturday for Josh Heupel's homecoming. But man,
College game day.
I can't wait for this game next week. But I can't say enough about how you should not, if you're a Vol fan listening to this, you should not take this for granted, this level of dominance. I mean, Vanderbilt just went to Georgia State and lost after they were feeling good for a little bit. It's not guaranteed. Auburn loses at home last week in embarrassing fashion in year 2 for the Hugh Freeze era. Like, Tennessee is rolling all across the board right now, and they're just it's just scary. Like, Tennessee has not been this scary on both sides of the ball in a very, very long time, and it's an exciting time. It's okay to be like in that category where I'm like, man, I'm glad that Tennessee does not play Ole Miss and Texas in the regular season this year, but you get Alabama at home. That's good. I mean, Florida is a train wreck. Oklahoma has not looked good out of the gate. Arkansas barely survives against UAB this weekend. They're on the schedule. Mississippi State gets blown out by Toledo. They're on your schedule at the end of the year. UTEP's on your schedule. Vandy, like I said, just lost. You look at this schedule, Georgia looks as gettable as they've been in the last 5 years of the Kirby Smart era. I don't know. I'm not saying Tennessee is winning all of these games, but what I am saying is if you're still looking at just, hey, Tennessee, I need to see more. I need to see if they, it's like, I get that, but you also have to take into account what they've done through 3 weeks. You have to take into account the kind of quarterback that Nico Iamaleava is and what we have seen on tape through 4 games. You have to take into account what Tennessee is doing in their front 7 translates. It translated against NC State. It will translate throughout the course of this season. Is they have so many dudes and we're able to rotate so many bodies on Saturday night. It should be scary because that defense is not going anywhere. The scoring defense is not going anywhere. The rush defense is not going anywhere. It's the Tennessee's ability to run the football. Deshaun Bishop's averaging, their running back 2 is averaging 10 yards a carry through 3 weeks. Like, Tennessee is running the ball down people's throats through 3 weeks. That's actually been more of the defining trait for Tennessee. Is as good as Nico's been, Tennessee's run the ball extremely well. And I just think some of these things with the offense and with the passing game is going to get better. This is just a double-digit win team. This is a college football playoff team. Like, there's just, I don't know what else to say. Barring injuries, which changes things, Tennessee is one of the best teams in college football this year, and I think it's okay to just say that. That doesn't mean, I don't know if they'll be that in November, but I know right now, Tennessee is one of the 4 best teams in college football right now. It's Tennessee, it's Georgia, it's Alabama, and it's Texas. Like, until Ohio State proves some stuff to me, they're kind of on the outside looking in, but I think those are the main 4. And we'll see.
That's the thing, is I don't know what Tennessee has proved. Like, I mean, through 3 weeks, I feel like Tennessee has like as high of grade as anyone in the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
For like all 3 of their tests, they got a 99% on all of them. I guess this has to be 100. You got 100. He aced this one, but it's still Kent State. You know, he still got Chattanooga. Chattanooga just put 3 points on Mercer, I think, this past week. Like, Kent State, you know, maybe the worst team in all of FBS. So
Chattanooga almost beat Georgia State last week, though.
And Georgia State is good. Is that?
I don't know. I mean, Georgia State just beat Vanderbilt. College football's weird.
Is Vanderbilt good? I don't know. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, the whole A is greater than B is greater than C. That's not always apply in college football. But yeah, Tennessee, without a doubt, looks like a juggernaut. But I think next week, and obviously NC State has they struggled with Louisiana Tech this past week. So I don't know what to expect from any of these teams so far. NC State is definitely the clearest data point on the resume so far. But yeah, I think this trip to Norman, Oklahoma, I think this is where, like, this is what people have been waiting for to see, you know, how legit this team. And it's not like Oklahoma is necessarily a college football playoff team. We're talking about 6-7 college football playoff teams in the SEC, and Oklahoma's not one of them. But I think still going on the road in Norman, I think that's just going to be a hostile environment. And I mean, if you see them put up another 50 spot, then I think you can seriously start to overreact to this. Maybe it's not even overreacting at that point. That Tennessee might be, you know, the best team in college football. But until then, I just can't get excited about the 70-point cupcake wins. You know, it's like you look at Missouri. What are they, 89-0 or something like that in their first 2 games? And it's like they they're in a dogfight with Boston College. That comes down to the wire in Missouri. That's a good win. Like, that's a solid Boston College team. But it's just, I don't know. Let's just take. I don't even know how to evaluate Ole Miss right now. Like, they're just playing nobodies. So we'll see. Who they played yesterday. Yesterday was a more impressive performance.
It's like 40-6 against Wake, and Wake canceled
Wake Forest team.
They canceled the home and home. Did you see that? After, like, the Wake's not going to Ole Miss next year. They paid them $1 million to not play next year.
Wow.
They're like, we're good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's funny is, like, Ole Miss, I think, is going to have a huge drop off. Like, they're losing so much, and it's not like they're lighting it up in the high school recruiting aspect of it. So I don't know. I feel like they're a great sleeper pick for 2024 Florida State next year. Like, the Ole Miss, like, Lane Kiffin might not be there. We'll get into that. I don't know. I think that might be a little bit presumptuous by Wake to get out of that game, because I don't think Ole Miss is going to be what they are next year, but we shall see.
It's also what is it gonna, like, ruin your reputation? Wake Forest, is that gonna, like, make you look bad as a football program? Like, what? What? I guess Ole Miss is probably better now than they were when you scheduled it, but, like, you weren't better than them when you scheduled it, so I don't know. That's weird.
Next up, Matt Green. Let's go to A&M. They stomped Florida. This was brutal. For Billy Napier and company, booed going into the tunnel after this game. There was a lightning delay in this one. It was brutal. There was, like, their late night reporting on, like, there's a board meeting scheduled or something for Florida today. It's over. Like, this is going to get worse for Florida down the stretch here, but I also just think the Ducks are not in a row to make a move. I mean, I don't think Scott Strickland, I don't think Florida fans want Scott Strickland to make his third hire, college football coaching hire at Florida. They don't have a president right now. I don't know. Like, I think in a normal situation where, I think the circumstances surrounding Billy Napier and just where Florida's at make this a little bit more complicated than just the average, like, pay the buyout and let's move on type deal. But I don't know. I thought I picked A&M to win this game, but I mean, this was ugly, Matt Green. And Florida, it's bad. And it's going to get, we talked about, like, how rare it is that even in down years to get to 3-9, 2-10 territory. UCF at home. I forgot who they have next week because it's not UCF. They have someone who you look. Who is it?
They're at Mississippi State. Next week.
And I mean, that's just brutal. They should probably win that game. But then outside of that, you're looking. I mean, they coming in Knoxville here in a month, and I don't know, Matt Green. This is bad. And what do you think of where Florida's at right now?
Also, that game's gonna be on national television, noon kickoff, either ABC or ESPN. Mississippi State and Florida. I'm not sure how that happened, but yeah, man, I think we talked about it. Like, there's a legitimate shot that, like, this team could start 5-1 and then, like, lose, like, 6 straight to end the season, and it's like you'd have a genuine conversation, right, about, like, oh, they lost all the good teams they played, though, so yeah, we're getting better, but there's going to be a good faith conversation to be had. But they're not even going to get to that point. Like, A&M and I mean, obviously Miami could turn out to be, national title contender. Like, that's a good team. But it's just the way it's happening. Like, it was always going to be about vibes, about feelings, and it's like you can stand some close losses to good teams, but, like, A&M is a first-year head coach. This is not one of the bigger rebuilds in college football, but they still fired their coach from a year ago. Like, and it just wasn't even competitive. Like, 300 yards on the ground to a backup quarterback who's, like, clearly limited as a passer. And I mean, not to, like, disrespect Marcel Reed, but I think A&M knows he's limited as a passer. That's why they designed the offense the way they did. And I mean, they could not stop this offense. And then the worst part of it, it's like the whole Mertz versus Lagway, like, that's, like, dividing the whole fan base, I'm sure, because you see Graham Mertz come out for the third possession of the game. And then what was it? They bring Lagway in. I think they only had the ball, like, for 12 plays in the first half or something. And they bring Lagway in for, like, that when they get the ball back with like 50 seconds left, and like it's like you put the true freshman in for like the last second before the half situation. Like that just seemed weird. And then you bring Mertz back out, and the offense seemed to move a little bit better. But so you had Lagway throw 2 picks, I feel like, and then Mertz throw 1. I feel like that's the most devastating part for Florida fans. That was like the backup quarterback was going to fix everything. Like, oh, this is so bad, but Lagway is going to be the savior. He's going to look good. We're going to beat some teams, and it's like, yeah, it might be a bad season, but we'll know what we have going into next year. And it's like, we're not even going to get to that point. Like there's no way Napier makes it to the cocktail party. And at this point, calling board of trustees meetings late on a Saturday night, like, does he make it to the Tennessee game? Does he make it past the bye week here after the Mississippi State game? Like, I mean, I guess it's safe to say if they lose to Mississippi State after getting blown out by Toledo, he doesn't make it to the UCF game. Like, you got a nice convenient bye week there. I don't know who the interim guy is. Like, I don't know who the most experienced guy on this staff is. Like, I don't know. It's a weird situation for sure. I feel like it's over. I feel like we all know it's over. I think it's harsh to fire a guy after honestly getting 4 years, of one graduating class through the program. I would like to give a guy 4 years, but I don't know. This just feels so bad and just so hopeless.
Yeah. I also think Florida fans might be delusional here. Like the Lane Kiffin stuff that I've seen this week, why is Lane taking the Florida job? This is a bad job right now. You don't know what the president situation is. You don't know the AD situation is. You look at where Georgia's at. You look at where Tennessee's at right now. I understand that you don't have the East-West anymore, but Alabama, red hot. Like if you're Lane Kiffin, Miami. I understand like you're kind of worried, and like what I talked about, where I wonder what kind of drop off. You're playing the Russian roulette with the portal, like you see Florida State where they hit on all cylinders with Keon Coleman and Jared Verse and company and go undefeated 13-0 in the regular season and the ACC title game last year. And then this year, completely different story because it's still just not built through the high school ranks. It's just a lot more difficult and arduous to sustain that level of competition when you just can't recruit at an elite level at the high school ranks. And Ole Miss will never be able to sustainably recruit at an elite level in the high school ranks. So I do wonder if Lane Kiffin looks at that of like, do I really want to go like 7-5 or 6-6 and maybe fall back a little bit after getting Ole Miss to the highest point this program has ever been in. Like he is back-to-back double-digit win seasons. Like Lane Kiffin is no question the best coach in Ole Miss history. And you look at it and you're like, okay, do I jump now? Because Dan Mullen also made this jump in the state of Mississippi. He got Mississippi State to #1 in the country. He felt like he probably could do all he could in Starkville, goes to Florida, and he gets fired for doing pretty well
at around
Florida.
Like 3 or 4 years after that.
Yeah.
#1 team too.
I guess it depends on where Lane's at. Does he want that kind of pressure? But I mean, Auburn was open. I felt like, I would take the Auburn job any day over the Florida job. And if you're not going to bite at Auburn, I just don't know why you would bite at this current Florida situation. Jed Fish probably makes the most sense to me, who I could see he just bounces around all over the place. And if you can get Jed Fish, like go get him from Washington, I think that's one, or it'd be a one and done, wouldn't surprise you. Like Camille Tucker at Colorado situation where, I don't know, I could just see it. I could see him bouncing pretty quick for Florida. He has some history there. But I don't know. I just don't think it's going to be, I just don't think it's as appealing of a job that some Florida folks might think it is. I think they have a lot of ducks they need to get in a row, and it's why I'm not necessarily certain that Billy Napier is going to be fired this week or early on, because I think there's just a lot of moving parts here that still have to play out for the Gators. But ultimately, do you look at this job as a good job right now? Because I just don't. I think you're not going to get the big time guys. Like seeing Urban's name thrown in. It's like, why, if you're Urban, are you jumping back into this? Like, Urban's not happening. Glenn Schumann, you see that name, and I'm like, Glenn Schumann's not taking the Florida job. Like, you just look at this. I just don't think you're going to get the kind of, I don't know. I think you're more in the Jamie Chadwell ballpark than the Lane Kiffin, Glenn Schumann ballpark. I don't think so.
I don't know. I think this is still the University of Florida.
Like, I've seen Dan Lanning, man. Like, Dan Lanning's not going to Florida.
Yeah, clearly after turning down the Alabama job, I think I think you can definitely argue that Florida's a better job than Auburn. I think they're right there the same level. I mean, Auburn is, I think that whole being the second team in your state thing is kind of works against Auburn. But like Florida it's still the University of Florida. They have Florida State and Miami, but like they're still the major university in that state. You know what I mean? So like I'm not just ruling out that Florida's not a good job, but I do compare it to that Lanning Alabama situation, because I think Alabama is clearly a better job than Oregon. But if you're already at Oregon, is Bama, better enough to jump ship for what you already have, what you've already built at your current place? I think Florida's easily a better job than Ole Miss, but is it better enough for Lane Kiffin to leave what he's already built? Like, obviously, the high school recruiting hasn't been great. So I think it feels like Lane Kiffin, he just feels like a guy who's ready to jump. It's like he's put like the best Band-Aids possible on Ole Miss, and he's made transfer to the SIP. He's like made it a thing that they're a portal destination. So like this looks to be one of the best teams they've had, and they've had some really good teams in recent years. So he just feels like a candidate to take the job. But I mean, I would think somewhere like Florida could pay Lane Kiffin more money than Ole Miss can pay. But
it's not even about pay. It's like, can you fix this? Is it sustainable? Are you going to have alignment at president, AD, and what your vision is? Are you going to have alignment that's better than where you're at Ole Miss? I don't know.
Look, we saw what the University of Tennessee was from 2010 to 2020.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up. Tennessee has an elite level in alignment with Danny White, the president, Donnie Plowman, the chancellor, Donnie Plowman, the president of the UC system, Randy Boyd. There is complete symmetry and alignment of focus.
As of when, though? Yeah. 3 years ago?
Yeah, about 3, when Heupel was hired, and a little bit before that when Danny White got brought in.
So it's so that's the kind of stuff that goes into like Florida is that job. The Swamp is one of the cathedrals of college football. It's an amazing place to watch a college football game, and they have a rabid fan base. They just have to make the right decisions. I think what Nick Saban said, you can throw millions at whoever you want, but if it's the wrong people, you're shit out of luck. You just have to do the right things with that money. But I can't rule out Florida being the kind of job that can poach a good coach from another program. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just when I was born and the Florida Gator years I lived through, but it feels like it's not ancient history of Florida being really good at college football, being one of the elite programs in the country. I would think just raw materials wise, Florida's got more to win a national championship than Ole Miss does. Ole Miss has never played for an SEC title. Florida's played for the second most SEC titles, won 3 national titles in the last 30 years, including one 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. It's not ancient history of Florida being elite. So I still have to have it as a top 10, top 15 job.
I guess it's just a TBD. I think it's a risk that I would not take if I was Lane. If I was Lane and I'm just not looking to be at Ole Miss long term, I am looking at 2 jobs in particular, and it's neither of them. I mean, Auburn would have been one of them, but the other one is LSU. I'm still waiting to see what happens with LSU and Brian Kelly and company the rest of this year and what that looks like. Because if you can make it another year at Ole Miss and keep it humming, I don't know. I don't know if Brian Kelly is long for the LSU job, which naturally brings us.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say before you segue to that. Jed Fish did graduate from the University of Florida, so that seems like maybe the kind of guy Florida might need to get. But I don't know. You got to set your eyes as high as you can first, and make Lane Kiffin tell you no.
I guess, but we shall see, Matt Green. Next up here we have LSU surviving, just doing everything they could to not win in Columbia yesterday, Matt Green, and they still found a way to steal one against South Carolina. South Carolina had some huge boom plays. Lenora Sellers had a big run. Raheem Sanders had a big run. The defensive line for South Carolina was unbelievable. They had a pick six callback, 2 pick sixes callback, I think, right? In this game for South Carolina.
Was it
brutal?
2?
Was it 2 or 1? I don't even remember. It was just all.
I just remember the one that royally
Yeah.
screwed them. You talk about breaking a TV moment, like that unnecessary roughness, blindside block they called to call back that pick six. I mean, that puts them up 11 with like 6 minutes left in the
Oh no,
game.
they win.
Like,
but also, how do you do that? Like, my thing is, like, how the game is called now in 2024. You know how they treat quarterbacks in 2024. He's not making a play on the ball anyway. It was just not necessary. Like, Garrett Nussmeier is not making that tackle. He wasn't, like, it was just unnecessary.
If he rocked him, like whoever that dude that rocked Aaron Murray, like SEC championship, rocked him, like, which wasn't called, by the way. Like, if it was like, helmet to helmet, like decleater type stuff, like I can understand it, but like it was like a two-hand shove to the chest, like chest neck-ish area, right? Like, I don't know, if you're not like just decking him like in the head, like, I don't know. It's football, man. You got to keep your head on a swivel on a pick six. Like, we all know this. It's just, and just like, also just the Buzz Killington aspect of this. Like, that's one of the moments of the college football season so far. South Carolina with this game sealing pick six, potentially. It's still like 6 minutes left. Like, Williams-Brice Stadium just going nuts. Game day there. Like, that just would have been one of the moments of the season. And I think that personal foul like totally negated it. Like, we need to do something of like, if it's away from the play, then it didn't affect the play, right? Like, you're saying this was unnecessary roughness because it was away from the play, so it didn't affect the play. Do it 15 yards on the kickoff. Like, let's get out of here. Like, it's not going to impact whether or not this guy returns this 90 whatever yards for a touchdown. Like, I don't know. I feel like we just have to do something about these calls away from the play that didn't actually impact the play, and this definitely impacted the final score of this game.
Yeah, but Lenoris Sellers got hurt. Like, I wonder how much that changed things, because that's what sucked, is Sellers going out kind of changed the feeling of this game. But South Carolina had their chances. I understand, like, being upset if you're a South Carolina fan about the officiating in this game. But that's still not ultimately why you lost. You also had a chance to tie. South Carolina not going for running another play to try and get 5 yards closer before that field goal was dumb. Like, you could have moved up a little bit more to make it easier for this kicker, because if you do, you win the game, or you at least tie it and go to overtime, and then who knows what happens. So there were in-game moments that still happened that I'm sure if Shane could get a redo, they would redo it. Some brutal back-breaking penalties, but this injury to Sellers, penalties, late game management that I just don't think was ideal. But I don't know. LSU just finds a way, man. Garrett Nussmeier had some big time throws, had some terrible throws. He's all over the place. He's a chaos enigma for LSU. I don't know what to make of LSU. I just know that every week they're kind of must see television, Matt Green. Like the USC game, this game, like they're just chaos. Like block punts, the pick sixes called back. Good wide receiver play. Garrett Nussmeier will throw some dimes every now and then. I don't know what to make of this defense to this point. The offensive line struggled against South Carolina's front. But
yeah,
it just, I don't know.
Don't think those South Carolina fans aren't going to catch that microaggression you just dropped, sir.
What did I do?
You said the USC game and then this game, implying that South Carolina is not USC.
Oh yeah, we're not doing that. Even in the family group chat, they dropped the USC.
Comment.
I'm like, no, you're not USC. You're SCAR. I call they're SCAR every time.
For sure. I mean, they turned the ball over 3 times. Like, they had their moment. Like, they had 243 yards on the ground, and I feel like when you go for 243 yards on somebody, you shouldn't lose that game. Like, but I don't know. They obviously made their own mistakes and everything, but if I'm a South Carolina fan, I don't know how the last 5 minutes turned out because I broke my television. And this is just, man, it felt like, and like you said, just all the big plays, like they were just making all the big plays you have to make if you're going to upset somebody. If LSU loses this game, like it might be LSU that's calling an emergency board of trustees meeting in the morning. Like, LSU did not play well enough to win this game as far as I'm concerned. Like, South Carolina felt like the better team most of the way. And obviously it was a bummer when Lenoris Sellers got hurt, but man, this was a brutal one. I will say, because it's South Carolina, and I can't be too complimentary of South Carolina. I have to take them back down a peg or two. Because it's South Carolina, it almost feels like a moral victory. Like, it was such a good performance. It's like game day was here. It was a lot of fun. We made so many big plays. The Willie B went nuts however many times during this game. This game, I feel like Shane Beamer is safe for 2024. Like, I feel like the vibes are already good enough. It's like things are good. He still needs to get to a bowl game, but yeah, I think it was a good performance from South Carolina. And great uniform matchup as well. But yeah, I think I'd be just so bummed if I was a South Carolina fan right now.
Yeah, because you would be 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd be 4-0 when you would host potentially undefeated Ole Miss and on October 5th.
You'd be 2-0 in the SEC too. No one else has even played 2 games, right?
Yeah, that's true. Because you still get A&M at home. You got to go to Oklahoma, but that's tough. At Alabama, that's a loss. But at Vandy, not tough. That's what we saw there. Clemson, gettable on the road. Wofford at home. Mizzou at home, like tough, but at least it's at home, and you saw the difference the home field makes, and that's one of the more underrated venues in the SEC and in college football as a whole. Is Columbia's a tough place to play, man, and they were rocking for this game. So it's just brutal if you're a Carolina fan, because man, you had them right where you want them. Also, great uniform day for Carolina. Love the black unions with the white helmet. That's a clean look. I like that one for
it. Definitely was.
Next big one up here, Matt Green. FSU 0-3, Cal 3-0 coming to town next week. Memphis now in the driver's seat as a G5 representative in the college football playoff. Who's more embarrassing right now, Florida or Florida State this season?
That's a really good question, because I feel like we expected this from Florida. Like, we expected to be talking hot seat, pretty early on for Florida. We knew this team was taking a step back from the 13-1 team, even though they like to pretend they went 13-0 last year. Mm-hmm. We knew this team was going to take a step back, but this is just I don't think anyone saw this. Like, at this point, Memphis beating them was not surprising. Like, that's the problem. Is it like it wasn't even surprising? Memphis was just, once again, probably the better team. Like, how many more times can you really throw DJ Uiagalelei out there? Like, at this point, it just feels like cruel. Like, he's just getting murdered by everybody. Like, just roasted. Like, he's the problem with the team. He's not the problem with the team. He's not the solution for the team, but he's not the problem. This team is just not good. And it's insane. Just the lack of just pulse that they have. 0-3, like you said, 3-0 Cal coming. At SMU, gonna play Clemson. Like, at what point do we start to talk hot seat for Mike Norvell, who just got an extension this offseason? Like, this is insane.
I just don't think it's gonna get better, because we talk about Florida's schedule. Florida State, man, I mean, they have real problems. DJU has been really bad. I mean, Memphis was in press man cover 0 with the game on the line on a Hail Mary attempt. That's insane. They were blitzing and just like trusting their man coverage there, and they swat the ball down to win. But I mean, DJU has been awful. Like, that is part of the deal here. But as a whole, just a bunch of misses. Roydell Williams, Benson was okay in this game, but man, Memphis came into Doak and felt like the better team. They were confident. This didn't feel like an upset, which is what I'd be most concerned about if I'm a Florida State fan, is it felt like the better team won, and it just felt like Florida State was the underdog trying to upset Memphis, which, if you're a Florida State fan, very concerning. I think Norvell just got a big extension in this previous offseason, so I think he's safe this year. But I mean, 2 0-3 starts in your tenure at Florida State is not great. Now, like, look at this schedule, Matt Green. Cal at home. I don't know. At SMU, they're not good, so that's winnable maybe. Clemson at home. At Duke. At Miami. North Carolina at home. At Notre Dame. And then the all-time, I mean, you get Charleston Southern. Then the all-time just, Florida and Florida State. I mean, that game, the end of the year. I mean, Florida State should get that.
Do they have to televise that one?
I don't know, but Florida State's not a bowl team. I'm looking at the schedule. I'm like, they're not going bowling. And I wonder how bad it actually gets, because we talk about 3-9, 2-10 Florida. I think Florida State might be staring at 3-9, 4-8.
Yeah, I think so. And that's we were expecting a step back. I don't think anyone was expecting, 3 leaps back.
Oh no, like this is I I mean this is terrifying if I'm a Florida State fan because the wheels are coming off here, and I just think Norvell's got to stop the bleeding. You got to beat Cal this week because 0-4. I mean, again, I think Norvell's safe, but this is a tough schedule. There is a point of like if you're 1-8 at Florida State that you're like, sorry, we just got to eat it because like this just can't happen here. This just can't. It's one of those jobs where you cannot go 1-8 or 1-7, whatever. In year what is this, year 5 or year 4 for Norvell?
I think it's year 5, I want to say. That what I was about to say is, yeah, like you can say the whole like we've been here before. It's been worse. That's kind of the problem. Like they started 0-4 back in 2021. Like that just doesn't happen in college football. Like there's usually some gimmies in there. But yeah, this is getting bad, and I'm definitely surprised. Like we as low as we both were on DJU and what he was going to be in the Florida State offense, I don't think we even expected this.
No, I mean, I don't know. Like this is I would be despondent if I was a Florida State fan right now because this is brutal. Quick hitters here, Matt Green.
Especially
Notre Dame
losing to Memphis, like
his old team.
He left Memphis for Florida State and then loses.
And you paid Memphis like $1.5 million to lose.
My Memphis Tigers, sir, and the driver's seat for that college football playoff.
They are, Matt Green. And they look good, man. Seth Hennigan's a player. Strong defense. I don't know. Memphis, they're a good team. Quick hitters here, Matt Green. Notre Dame blows out Purdue. Purdue is awful. Ryan Walters, he's on the hot seat. Like that was horrific. At home, that kind of performance. And then I wanted to combine this with another just brutal beatdown. Oregon and Notre Dame made huge statements because Oregon was in a dogfight against OSU at the half. I was watching a lot of this game. And Oregon State went into the locker room with some momentum. Javani McCoy was making some plays. And it was like, okay, Oregon State's hanging with them like I predicted. And then the second half, they just do a full-on curb stomp on the Beavers. And it's just kind of one of those where, okay, Oregon might have figured some stuff out. And I think that's a little scary if you're the rest of the Big Ten and college football right now, is I think that might be a tipping point for Oregon. And I think the other part of it that scares some people is, oh God, Notre Dame blew out Purdue on the road. Notre Dame's back in the driver's seat of trying to if they can run the gauntlet and run the table at 11-1, they're probably making the college football playoff. Like I think that was the kind of game you needed if you're Marcus Freeman and company to right the ship on the road at Purdue, who I think is the worst team in the Big Ten based on what we just saw there. That was horrific. But oh my God, Matt Green, it's a lose-lose for this SEC fans where they're like, oh, Notre Dame's done after NIU lost. Not so fast, my friend. Notre Dame putting on a clinic at Purdue, and with their schedule, 11-1 is still very much in the cards for the Irish. And Oregon, man, they righted the ship a little bit.
Yeah, this was the performance we've been waiting for from Oregon. So I thought that was nice to see. It looked close early, like you said, but then they just busted this thing open. But hey, you take it easy on Ryan Walters over there, trying to fire this guy after the second game of year 2 of 3 games of year 2. Let's just take it easy. Give him some time up there with the Boilermakers.
It's one of those jobs too that you can't have. I didn't like the defensive coordinator hire at the time. It's like Jerry Tiller. You look at the best Purdue situations, you got to get an offensive guy. You got to have a guy who knows how to work with less. You got to just it's a tough job. Purdue is a really tough college football job. Like go get GJ Kinney from Texas State. I don't know who it is this go around, but Purdue, I didn't like the defensive coordinator to head coach hire at a place like Purdue. I think Ryan Walters is an elite defensive mind, but this was just a weird, funky hire to me, kind of like Phil Longo at Wisconsin as his OC. Speaking of that, you want to hit on Alabama just absolutely crushing Wisconsin that noon slot before we wrap up here today, Matt Green?
Yeah, I think that was the performance we needed to see from Alabama as well. And we kind of talked about it. Like it felt like a game people were going to overthink. Like, oh, they didn't look good versus South Florida, Wisconsin, Camp Randall. They're going to jump around. It's going to be a tough place. And it's like, no, Alabama's just going to out-athlete Wisconsin. It was a game for a quarter. Like it was back and forth a little bit. This offense looked a little shaky, but then you just saw the big plays and Jalen Milroe using his legs. So yeah, it was a good performance from Alabama. I think I don't know what the line was on Georgia Alabama prior to Saturday, but I'm sure it's fluctuated a good bit. I bet you there's a chance. I would guess Georgia was probably like a touchdown favorite before yesterday in Tuscaloosa. Now I could see Alabama being favored or Georgia being like a 3-point favorite. I don't know.
Have you seen the latest?
No, I don't even know what it was previously.
Sorry, I'm pulling it up right now. FanDuel is not loaded.
But yeah, I mean, other than like Alabama, like seeing the big plays in the run game, like seeing Ryan Williams, like these playmakers, because that's been my biggest criticism of Alabama the last couple of years. Like they didn't have the playmakers that they had in their heyday when they had Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and the Calvin Ridleys and the Jerry Judys of the world, So, if they get back to having those elite playmakers, this offense is a lot more dangerous because I mean, when it was Jermaine Burton being like your number one receiver, like that's just a big drop off from what we've seen Alabama have. And these playmakers this year, they're starting to look more explosive.
I mean, Ryan Williams, the dude. Jalen Milroe played really well in that game. Alabama, they're gonna be there. It's gonna be a fun game. So right now, 7.5 for Georgia on the road in Alabama. That's the latest I'm seeing.
I wonder if that's changed yet. I could see that line moving a little bit after Georgia's performance against Kentucky and Alabama.
But how clutch is it though? Buys for both, so both are going to be at full strength here in 2 weeks in Tuscaloosa. I mean, that's just going to be big time. And Tennessee's on a bye that week, so I get to give all my attention to Georgia, Alabama.
I'm looking at it right now. I'm seeing some 4.5.
Are you?
Yeah. So there one is at maybe Caesars at 3.5, one at 3.5, and then a lot of 4.5. So I bet you what you saw. I would like to see like how it fluctuated because I bet you Georgia was over a touchdown prior to the performances yesterday, especially when we talk about like what Georgia faced and Brock Vandagriff and a running offense like Kentucky. Like Alabama's going to do that a whole lot better than Kentucky was doing it, and Jalen Milroe is a whole lot more dangerous than Brock Vandagriff. So that might be a little something to worry about going into Tuscaloosa, as well as Bryant-Denny Stadium, a little more intimidating than Kroger Field as well.
All right, Matt Green, well, let's wrap up. How do we do this weekend?
This weekend was not the best performance for your boy, sir. Overall is fantastic. Went 9-3 overall. Not like Chase Thomas over here. 11-1 on the overall. So big time performance, sir. You went 6-6 against the spread. So, still 50-50, solid percentage. I went 3-9 against the spread yesterday, sir, and won the first 3 of the day. So, I was feeling good, and then just, taking L's after L's against the spread. But, that'll happen sometimes. Zeus, home dog of the week. He believed in Florida for some reason. I probably talked him into it. I was like, Zeus, I was a kid of the 90s, Zeus. Like Florida, the swamp, you just don't lose back to back. No, I couldn't justify it, So I steered Zeus wrong on that one. I'll take credit for that. So Zeus falls to 1-2 on the season. He's looking to bounce back next week. But yeah, that's all I got for the pick. As you know, the backyard brawl, sir, always delivers. Pitt, West Virginia, always a fun game. Unfortunately, the Mountaineers didn't come out victorious in this one. But yeah, Pittsburgh looks like they got an offense, sir.
Oh, who said that on the preview pod? Don't look now. ACC dark horse, Pitt Panthers. Now that Pitt's legit. Can't quit Pitt. Matt Green. Can't quit Pitt. Cardiac Cats.
There you go.
Let's ride. Eli Holstein Hive. The Holstein Hive. That's what they call it up there in Pittsburgh. Matt Green, always a pleasure, my friend, and I will talk to you in a couple days.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.